Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Way podcast. So those of you that listened last time will have heard part 2 of the kind of panel interviews that I was doing around do we all have the same 24 hours in a day? And I am delighted to welcome back one of the panelists today for a solo interview. Jan King, welcome back. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I think there's several reasons why I asked Jan to come back. And some of them I didn't even know before we spoke. So you would have heard on the podcast how Jan really spearheaded working her way, right? Finding work that worked for her way, way, way before it was normal to have flexible working or work from home days. And I think it's such an inspiration for so many of us because it's so easy to feel trapped in these little boxes that we operate in because we think that in order to achieve X, we have to do Y because that is what we've been told. And I love that Jan is a great example of breaking the mold around that. So, Jan, welcome back. Say hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I like the way you phrase about working my way because I think that was a result of having to write down what I wanted rather than um I had the end result in mind. So it was always going to be, what do I want to do? And also why? Because I hadn't believed this, but when you attach that why, it does become more powerful. Ultimately, my why was that I couldn't get decent childcare, so that became my why. But I wanted to work as well, and I still wanted to have time with my friends that weren't mothers, because when I had my children, I was the only one of my friends that had children. So it was really important for me to be able to have time with them, and more importantly, time without my children, because I think
Yeah.
that's really important. So those were the driving factors in why I was doing what I was doing and the way I was doing it.
Yep, and I love that. And I saw it was on Instagram yesterday, actually, there was a guy that posted a video, and I don't know if it was for Valentine's Day or for what. And I don't even know how I saw it in my feed because I've got no idea who it was. But anyway, someone that I obviously follow on Instagram. And the meme was basically like, it was a video of, no, it wasn't a meme, it was like a little reel, I guess, of him looking after his kids. And the text around it was like, my wife is having her time right now. I don't know what she's doing. I don't care what she's doing, but she's having her time where she doesn't have to focus on being a wife or a mother. And I thought, yes, that is so, so important.
It is, because one of the mergers that always happens to you, and you don't even know when it happens, is when somebody refers to you as Zach's mummy or Luke's mummy. And I'm like, wow, wait a minute, there's a merger I didn't know about. And it's not happening. And I'm that person who thinks, if we're in the school playground and you have not taken the time to learn my name, then you do not deserve to be in my airspace. Because, yes, I know you forget names, say you have forgotten it or whatever, but do not call me somebody's mummy.
Yeah, yeah, because you get to retain that sense of identity. So, what I would love to dig in a little bit more, because easy for you to say that it was for you wrote down what you wanted and then you attached it to your why, and you talked about the power of actually when we're clear on our why for doing things, it makes it much more. I can't think, I heard it on a podcast last week, something about when we're clear on the why, the rest follows with more ease. That was not the quote because it was much more succinct than that. But for many, many people, that sense of identity that you are referring to, and that understanding of why and what, right? So the question of what do you want is like the question of who are you? It seems like a real basic question, but what do you want can be one of the hardest questions to answer for many, many people because they haven't actually got a clue because they never stop to think. So I don't know if you want to say any more around that. Like, how do you actually identify what you want? How do you attach to your why? Like, how can people who are like, I've not got a fucking clue where to start with this. Like, how? How?
Okay, so I would say you're given 12 months, and this is going to throw up a lot of people go, oh my God, that's really controversial. You're given maternity leave for
Mm,
a reason, and you're given time, or you should be given time to spend with your child.
mm,
And I think part of that time is not only about getting into routines, but working out what it is you want, because many people don't want to go back to work. You know, we're in a society where they have to. So if they're having to go back to work, I think that the best thing you can do is to work out how you would like to get back. My how was outrageous because I wanted a full-time salary for a part-time wage, term time only. And that's
mm,
outrageous. And you know you're not going to get that, but you have to start somewhere. And by starting at the most outrageous place and then bringing it into something that was more manageable and realistic is how I approached it. Um, I wanted to go back to work,
mhm,
but I I couldn't get good, affordable childcare because when I had my son, childcare it was very limited. So you were fighting for places, and it
mm,
was really expensive. You know, as expensive as it is today. And I was like, well, why am I paying two mortgages to go to work? And
mm,
I didn't want to do that. So that's what was my driving factor in finding a compromise. And I also didn't want to be called somebody's mummy. You know, I wanted my own identity. I didn't know what that looked like at the time, but I did know it was certainly not being called such and such as, you know, because it's meant with good intention, but it wasn't received well from myself. And, you know, I kind of had to adjust my thinking on that at the time, which I didn't do very well. And I just to say, can you not just learn my name? But
mm,
there's also a lot going on when you have a child in that it takes a really, really long time to get over it. And
mm,
we underestimate that bouncing back. And, you know, you go for your 6 week check and, you know, things are starting to go back to normal, but your body isn't, your mind isn't. And those are all things that are gonna, I feel, are gonna affect you. And then at some later stage, play out unless you take the time to examine almost what it is you're feeling. And I guess
yeah,
that that's one of the reasons that I got into what it is that I am currently doing.
yeah. And you're talking about this here in the context of being a mum and being a person in your own right and maternity leave. But do you think it also applies? Because obviously I am not a mum. Um, do you think it also applies across the board? So, you know, you've got that maternity leave period to think about what is it that I want and all of the rest of it, and those times to examine the feelings and feel the feelings. But what about other people? Like, what about the men listening or the non-parents listening? Do you think that there's an overlap there about work to be done? How do you see it?
I see. I actually think everyone at some point in their working life should be given a sabbatical so that
Mhm.
they can assess. whether they actually like what they're doing and, where they want to go. Because if you just keep going, 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 you know, I think that's when we get conditioned and we feel that we have to, rather than doing what we want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes there is that need for space to be able to examine the question of, well, what is it that I want? In my Your Way membership, and it'll be finished by the time this comes out. At the moment, we're doing this existential program, and we're looking at the questions of who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And in the context of a busy life that we all have, work, family, other things, and all the rest of it, it's just not generally for most people a priority to sit down and ask those questions of what do I want, what do I need? Because actually, the kids need feeding, then they need to get out to work, and then the clients need stuff, and then this happens, and then they come home, and then they're exhausted, and then they fall into bed, and then they get up and they do the whole thing the next day, and then something disaster goes on at work or a kid's sick. Like there's not a lot of space in there for the person.
Yeah, there's no space.
Mm,
That people have no space, and I'm a firm believer in carving out time to have for yourself, to do something for yourself, whether I know it's not possible for a lot of people, but maybe, getting up 5 minutes earlier. I mean, I used to get up early to mop my floors that I would have time on my own. And everyone was like, why are you mopping the floors? And it was like, I needed something to do that was very mundane. So, kind of like chop wood, carry water, for
yeah.
want of a better analogy. But it had to be very mundane, but also very quick, that would just give me that time and space to have my own thoughts, and wasn't sitting down for me, because at that time I kind of equated sitting down with being lazy. And then it was like, but I'm on the go the whole time. So why don't I take time?
Mm,
And that's really where the self-care started, and having to put my needs first before everyone else's. And I was very, very mindful that not only did I need a full cup, I needed something that was overflowing to be able to deal with, young boys running around. Because I was in my late 30s when I had my children. I'd had time to kind of do what I wanted always, and then
mm,
somebody comes along who's got to be a priority, and it was challenging.
mm,
And no, I didn't respond to it very well. But my response after about 3 months became Jan first, everyone else after. Because if I wasn't well, there was no way on earth anyone else was going to be well. And
yeah.
I did, yes, I got called selfish, and I was like, yep, I own that. I can wear that badge, and I don't mind having a t-shirt saying I'm selfish. Absolutely, was happy to own it. And I think because I was happy to own it straight away, rather than making a compromise,
Mm,
it's become so much easier as I've got older to just be able to say, this is my time. As I call it, the me time express. Let's all board it on a Friday evening and see where we go.
yeah, brilliant. I love that. And it's so, so important. One of the things, and I can't remember if I've talked about it on the podcast before, but when I worked in law, there would every now and again be these initiatives. You'd get these emails about different well-being things. And I would honestly look back on it now and be like, it was just another tick box exercise. But you would get these emails about like there's going to be a talk on, or there's going to be various things on, and I would look at this stuff come into my inbox. And I'd be like, that looks really interesting. And I knew that I was stressed. I didn't quite know how stressed I was because denial is a powerful thing. I knew I was stressed. And I had this email folder in my Outlook. And I don't remember what I called it, but I called it something like well-being. And these emails would come in and I would file these emails into this well-being folder so I could go back and go through them all. And to this day, those emails are sat unread. I mean, obviously, I don't have access to that inbox anymore, but
Mhm.
because if we don't intentionally create time to do stuff, the time will fill with other things. And
Absolutely.
and if we don't look after ourselves, you're right. We will fall over and everything else will go to shit.
Yep. Been there.
And and I think it's interesting where you say because there's such a and we don't necessarily need to get into like how society is set up and how they want us to be in a certain way and all of the rest of it. It's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. But there is such a negative connotation around selfish. There is such a push to be giving to everybody else before ourselves. And it's almost like we need to revolutionize the word selfish or come up with another one. Because it's like,
Self-centered. You need to be
yeah,
self-centered.
but even that has got negative connotations.
Um, that's for
Maybe
other
not.
people, not for me.
Yeah, yeah,
When
yeah, yeah.
you are self-centered, you are considering yourself and your
Yeah,
being,
yeah,
and that's powerful.
yeah. And I love that because if we aren't looking after ourselves, if we aren't centering ourselves, if we aren't like, but it's so, so hard in a society where we don't learn that we are worthy. We don't learn that we matter. We learn that we earn worthiness. We earn love when we do, when we give. Like you said before, sitting down was rest. It was lazy. Sorry, not rest. It is rest. But it was lazy and it was bad. And it's like we need to have this whole reworking of how we do life and how we show up as people and how we have the resilience to be that person and show up as that person. Um
I do think, though, even when you are putting yourself first, it's not to say that you are not going to trip up. It's not, it's not fail proof. There will be times where even if you have the best self-care routine on earth, you will falter. But
yeah,
it's recognizing that it's temporary and that there are things that you can do that will transition you through it, not effortlessly, but easier than if each time you're having to start from scratch.
yeah, yeah. And what I hear when I talk to you, Jen, and my because I do a lot of nervous system stuff, my word that I would use around it is that you come across as quite regulated, like you're able to get back into your center. Okay.
Mm.
Now, but I know that the tools that you use and the stuff that you work with, you would call it something a little bit different because you work with emotional intelligence. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what is emotional intelligence? How do you do work with it? I remember doing an emotional intelligence profile a few years ago. And when I first started out as a coach, and it came out quite high, apart from my resilience was quite low. And I was like, I am resilient. And then later on, I was like, actually, I wasn't resilient at
I,
all.
I think the first thing to say is when we do those tests, uh it's what is going on at that time,
Mm,
and it is about how you are able to respond to not only your own emotions, but the emotions of people around you. And that's where you get, like people that have got high empathy, they're really, really aware of everyone's emotions to the point that they take them on rather than their own. And the
I'm a bit
work
like that.
I I I think as women we all are, and we're all that we are really learning to do is to, if you think of it like a radio dial, is adjust up and down for the situations that we are in, and being able to have that awareness, because emotional intelligence will give you a happiness factor, and people get hung up on this happiness factor. It's just an indication of where you are at that time. And when you learn the different components of, emotional intelligence, that's when you're able to regulate yourself and do it quicker.
Yeah.
It's a real, I mean, one of the, everyone talks about self-awareness, and that is a big part of emotional intelligence, but also self-regulation and social responsibility. They're also components that don't get talked about as much. And I guess because they are not as trendy, but they are points about our interactions with other people. So they're absolutely crucial to how our lives can be running, and to have that awareness is really, for me, what it is all about.
Yeah. So someone comes to you, they say, Jan, help me with my emotional intelligence. Then what happens? Like,
Well,
so you do like, as in, so what happens? They get the test, they've got awareness, then what? Like, talk me through the process.
so what the process is, you get a 32-page document which
Hmm.
goes through various subcategories within those categories. So you've got your stress factors, you've got your self-awareness, you've got your resilience, and it's all done in a wheel. And we look at each one of those components in relation to an area of your life that you want to look at. It could be your relationship, it could be work, it
Hmm.
could be your social responsibility. It could be that fact that you don't value recycling, and you maybe want to be more conscious of that.
Mm.
So it's about looking at your responses and working with you to give you an understanding, and also some tools of things that you can do, so that when these emotions crop up, because let's face it, every single day, every minute, we have emotions,
Yep.
and it's being able to just acknowledge them, know that they are fleeting, and let them pass, or making a home for them if it's something big, and working out what you need to do to move you forward. Because a lot of the time it's our emotions, and it's our reaction to the emotion that trips us
Mhm.
up,
Yeah.
rather than our awareness to it.
So you get the wheel, you've got the awareness, and it's great. And then do you support people? Like, does that wheel then form part of like a coaching tool that you use with people? Do they take it away? Is it a combination? Like, how does it work?
It's it is a combination of all things, and it's very bespoke to you, to what you need at that time, and there's lots of different things that we will talk about. So if somebody gets very anxious about things, then we will go through, say, a tap-in routine for them,
Mhm.
for when that anxiety comes up, that they can tap through it.
Mhm.
We'll do walking therapy, talking therapy, and they're just all things that I can show my clients, so that then they're able to take a little toolbox away with them, so that when these things come up, they can deal with them.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that's so, so important because so often we are told or sold this lie of like, right, you're going to do this work. and then all of your problems will be solved and you'll skip down the road forever and it will be amazing. And it's just not true. What we have to do is realize life's going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. You can try and be as organized and controlling as you like. It's still going to, life's still going to happen. But having the tools to then deal with life so it doesn't floor you is the bit that makes the difference, rather than chasing this like illusory thing of being there to some like unicorn place, which by the way, I spent a long time chasing. When I first came into this world, I was like, but if I can just do all of this stuff, and if I can just work through all my trauma, and if I can just regulate my nervous system, then I'll feel good all the time. And then I was like, oh no, that's not how it works.
I remember the first time when I realized that I would be doing this work forever, and I was like, "What do you mean? No, but I've done that I've done, and you're kind of like ticking them off. I've done. It's not that I've done, it's that I keep repeating. You have to, I feel, keep repeating
Yeah.
things. And I think very often what happens is we get to that place where things are really good. So we're like, as you say, we skip off into the distance and
Mm,
like, yeah, we'll go back. And it's like, no, go deeper, go more, do more. It's the meditating. I think people underestimate the power of meditation. They underestimate the power of breath work. These are all things that we cover in emotional intelligence, and bringing you back to who you are and what you can do, and those parts of you that have been forgotten. And it's by using the report and looking at all the various subsections, and there are some where you will be incredibly high, and there are some, and it's usually the opposite one, that you will be
yeah.
very, very low. And I don't generally talk about the empathy and things like that, because for some people it's not going to be the empathy, it's going to be um people pleasing and not setting boundaries.
Mm.
So yes, you can be very empathetic. How does that show up for yourself, and what's the tool you need to be able to keep it as small as possible? I don't believe you'll ever get rid of it, but I do believe you can reduce it or put it into perspective for yourself so that you feel really comfortable in the actions that you are taking.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And it really, really resonates with me because as a very empathetic person, people pleasing was my thing, and perfectionism and all of the rest of it, and all of the ways that I tried to manage it. Whereas actually, just having the tools can make a massive, massive difference. So, Jan, if people wanted to come and find, if people were like, this sounds interesting, I want a report, where can people come and find you?
Come and find me on Facebook, Jan King, or you can email me at it's jan@etq.org.uk, and I will be able to give you more information.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Jan. Now, I have got one question to close us out. Um, because I'm like, I haven't asked this question and I need to know. Right near the start, we talked about the power of connecting into your why, right? If we know why we are doing things, like what's the purpose? Why, like, and it might be why am I here? What's my purpose? Blah, 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 blah. But the why that then allows us to do other things more easily. What is your top tip for the listeners for how to connect into their why?
I would look at all of those things that really light you up,
Mm,
that make you belly laugh. It could be sitting on a summer's day in a pub having a glass of wine. It could be in Costa or somewhere having coffee. What are those things that really make you smile, giggle, laugh, and start there, because they're going to be the key to your why. So my why has evolved over the years, and my why was my boys and raising my boys. And now that they are both adults, my why is keeping them out of my home and being independent, so that I have my independence. I know that sounds kind of like, huh? But they left me as 18-year-old boys, and
Mm.
they've grown into men. And I think it is so important that, yes, there's always going to be a home for them, but they need that independence to really start to fly and do things their own way.
Yeah, yeah. Which is the healthy place of doing things in the vast majority of situations.
It is, but it's hard to do. I lose my emotional intelligence so quickly when certain things happen. And I know that I'm losing them, and I don't try and go, okay, well, I've got to be a certain way. I just let them go, reflect on it, and learn how I can be better.
Yeah. And I think that's always a tip for all of us. Rather than trying to be perfect all the time, can we learn, observe, notice, see the patterns, take the next step? Because one of the things that you said about going deeper and deeper, the first coach I ever worked with, when I used to get really pissed off that the same thing was coming up again, she's like, but each thing is a spiral. So you work down a layer, you work down a layer, you work down a layer, you work down a layer. So it's not that you're working on the exact same thing at the exact same level again, but you go
Different.
back through, you go back through, you go back through, and then yes, I remember the day that my therapist said to me, he was like, "Your expectations." Just he was like, "The problem is that you're causing your own suffering with your own expectations." He was like, "Because this is never going to get easy." And I remember just being like, "Then what's the fucking point?"
To that point
And
as
then
well. Right.
okay, so Jan, thank you so much for having. Thank you. I was going to say thank you so much for having me on, but this is my podcast, so
It's yours.
thank you so much for thank you so much for coming on again. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll make sure that we get your links in the show notes as well, so people can go and check you out on Facebook and drop you an email if they want to. Is there anything that you would like to say to close us out today?
No, I'm I'm complete.
Good. Good. Well, thank you so much for being on, and everybody else, I will see you next time. Take care. Bye. Before you go, I so hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, I'd like to ask you a favor, please, because the way that this podcast grows and the way that more people get to benefit from these materials is that more people find it. And that means that subscribes and likes and shares are so, so important to this space. So, my ask of you, if you got value from the podcast today, is give it a review, give it a like, share it with a friend, and make sure that you are subscribed. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being here. And I look forward to continuing to support you to do life, business, relationships, and all of it your way.